You're listening to Myers-Briggs Question Corner with Edythe Richards.
Hello folks, glad to have you all tuning in to another episode of Myers-Briggs Question Corner, especially in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic. As many people have said over the past few weeks, we'll get through this together. I'm pleased to have people reaching out and asking questions related to personality and coping with COVID-19. So please keep those questions coming and I'll be glad to answer yours on air. Today's question comes from a lady named Carol. Many of us are dealing with increased anxiety as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, but are there certain Myers-Briggs types who are more susceptible? Carol, thanks so much for reaching out with this important question. My short answer to the question is that anxiety is seen in all personality types, and personality may hold clues to the reason for the anxiety and therefore what to do to manage it. With that said, it's a really frightening time right now, and we're all dealing with heightened levels of anxiety as a result. And a lot of this has to do with uncertainty. We don't know what precisely is going to happen or how we're going to be impacted. And it's really easy for us to go down that road of spiraling down a mountain into a state of dread or panic. Some personality types may not express their anxiety openly and may be very good at hiding it. Others may act out in unhealthy ways that unintentionally hurt others and themselves. So before I get into the nitty-gritty of the Myers-Briggs, let me just say that the National Disaster Distress Helpline is available to anyone experiencing emotional distress related to COVID-19. And you can call 1-800-985-5990 or text TalkWithUs to 66746 to speak with a counselor. So it's not unusual for anxiety and depression to occur together. And to hear more about Myers-Briggs types and depression, please tune into my podcast, Myers-Briggs and Depression, and I'll include a link to that in the listening notes. So in last week's episode, I talked about how this COVID-19 pandemic might affect people based on the 4 dichotomies of personality that the Myers-Briggs measures. In today's episode, I'm going to focus more on the cognitive functions, particularly the dominant function. And what I mean by this, for those of you tuning in who are less familiar with Carl Jung's psychological types, according to the theory, there are 2 pairs of psychological functions: perceiving functions, which relate to the sensing and intuition dichotomies, and judging functions, which relate to the thinking and feeling dichotomies. All of us use all 4 of these functions at different times and in different circumstances, but we each have one that we tend to rely on more than the others, and this is known as our dominant function. Essentially, we are at our best level of functioning and we're our most confident when we're using our dominant function. So before I get into the cognitive functions, I'd like to take a quick look at the introversion-extroversion dichotomy, since this one is often the most obvious during this time of social distancing and may explain some things about why some of us feel more anxious these days than others. Extroversion and introversion relates to how we're energized and how we take action. If you're more extroverted, you're more attuned to external stimuli, and this often manifests as more outwardly outgoing, energetic, and social behavior. If you're more introverted, you're more attuned to internal thoughts and ideas, and this may manifest as more reserved or solitary behavior. Remember that we all use both in our daily lives, but there's one that comes more easily and naturally to us, and that's what I mean when I use the word preference. If you have to choose, which side do you more naturally fall on? So this one is pretty straightforward. During this time of social distancing, people who are more extroverted may become more anxious if they're forced to be alone and don't have that external outlet that they used to have. And let's face it, online chats and virtual happy hours aren't always going to cut it. If you're more introverted, these times of social distancing may be a great excuse for you to stay home and lock yourself away from the world. The fact is, though, that we as people are wired for human connection and interaction, and your Myers-Briggs preferences may provide a clue into how much. If you're extroverted and you're feeling anxious because you're cooped up and you're not able to get the external stimulation you crave, unfortunately, the virtual world is going to have to be your friend for a little while longer. But if you can, try to get outside at least once a day. To my extroverted friends out there, I did an episode a couple weeks ago entitled Extroverts and Social Distancing, so please do tune into that one for some additional tips, and I'm going to include a link in the listening notes. And to my introverted friends, you may be relishing in this time to actually be yourself without some extrovert interrupting your alone time. But I'd say to also be mindful of not taking things too far. Be sure to check in with others while maintaining social distance, of course. Having good relationships and connecting regularly with others has, according to numerous medical studies, been found to reduce stress, to increase happiness, and to help people live longer. So moving on to the cognitive functions, let's take a look at the perceiving functions, sensing and intuition. These are information gathering functions. They describe how new information is understood and interpreted. People who prefer sensing are more likely to trust information that is in the present and is tangible and concrete. That is, information that can be understood by the five senses. They tend to distrust hunches, which seem to come out of nowhere. Sensing types prefer to look for the details and facts. For them, the meaning is in the data. It's different for intuitive types. They tend to trust information that is less dependent upon the senses and that can be associated with other information, either remembered or discovered by seeking a wider context or pattern. They're more attuned to general concepts or the big picture, and they may be more interested in future possibilities. For them, the meaning is in the underlying theory and principles, which are manifested in the data. Dominant sensing types include ISTJ and ISFJ, and ESTP and ESFP. ISTJs and ISFJs are dominant introverted sensing. They are all about their routines and knowing what to expect. So they may get anxious if their routines are thrown off or if they're put on the spot and not prepared for something, because that's when they believe they're most likely to make a mistake. One way to alleviate this anxiety is to think about stressful situations they've encountered in the past and make note of the steps they took to overcome them. ISTJs and ISFJs trust their past experience, so noting past accomplishments and reminding themselves that they don't have to be perfect is going to be key. ESTP and ESFP are dominant extroverted sensing. These types may have a particularly hard time being cooped up as they tend to rely a lot on the physical environment, especially physical activity. Some triggers of anxiety could also be being overwhelmed with too many monotonous tasks or not being around people who appreciate them. It's very important for ESTPs and ESFPs to be around other friendly and supportive people, so I'd recommend that during these times they make sure they do that often, perhaps with an activity like a game or a task, rather than just sitting around and talking. Let's take a look at dominant intuitive types. These are ENFP, ENTP, INFJ, and INTJ. So where dominant intuitives often get into trouble is overthinking. They can easily spiral into the shoulda, woulda, coulda. I should have invested more money. Why didn't I call her back? Ruminating on things that happened in the past and what they should have done. Or they may start catastrophizing about the future and what if? What if I get laid off? What if I get sick? This overthinking can become a problem because it's like a vacuum. It sucks you in and it keeps you from actively participating in your own life. One way to deal with this is to pause and make note of what's going on. In my work with emotional intelligence, this is called emotional inventory tracking. So what you can do several times throughout the day is to stop and write down what emotion you're feeling. In other words, name the emotion. What are you feeling? Why are you feeling that way? What is the effect of that emotion on yourself and the people around you? And finally, can you continue feeling that way or stop feeling that way? It only takes 2 to 3 minutes to do this, and it's a great way to enhance your self-awareness. Additionally, for INTJ and ENTP types especially, knowledge is power. The more they know about the causes of anxiety and the science behind it and how it manifests, the better they'll be able to deal with it. For ENFP and INFJ types, having people to talk to and a support system to draw upon is going to be especially important. Moving on to dominant thinking types. These are ESTJ, ENTJ, INTP, and ISTP. For ESTJ and ENTJ types, both tend to be take-charge leaders who are typically always on the go. And this can be the very source of any anxiety that they may have. They've got too much on their plates and a massive drive to be successful and get things done. If things or people don't run smoothly or produce the results that are expected, this can be a source of stress for ESTJs and ENTJs as well. It's therefore very important for them to take some time to stop and take note of all the great things they've accomplished. If they're feeling anxious and the stress is manifesting in unhelpful ways, such as family members noting that they're very hard to be around, stop and think about the precise cause of the stress. Understanding it can be the first step to eliminate it. For INTP and ISTP types, being boxed in or micromanaged is bound to be a source of stress, or having to deal with incompetent people, or just having to interact with people too much in general. INTPs in particular have very active brains, and they may also be prone to overthinking. For both, it's very important to carve out time in their schedules to maintain their physical health and their emotional health, which means being away from the world and possibly even practicing mindfulness and meditation. Now on to dominant feeling types: ENFJ, ESFJ, INFP, and ISFP. INFPs and ISFPs tend to be very sensitive souls, so being around awkward social situations or uncaring or mean people is going to be a huge source of anxiety. INFPs are also very prone to rumination and overthinking, and ISFPs need to be surrounded by an aesthetically pleasing environment, so clutter and noise and too many negative people aren't going to be good spaces for them. The good news for these folks is that during this time of social distancing, they're likely to be at home anyway, surrounded by people and things they love more than usual. It's important, though, that they continue to take time for themselves and seek out emotional support from others who genuinely care. They won't be able to be productive if they can't have these things. For ENFJs and ESFJs, they can also put a lot of pressure on themselves to succeed, but it's often to make other people happy and to make everything perfect in an attempt to please others. if they feel like they're not living up to the expectations of others, or if they don't have the love and support of the people close to them, this is likely to be a source of anxiety. Finding a way to express to their loved ones how much they need support and appreciation is crucial for ESFJs and ENFJs especially, but for all feeling types in general. Now, I want to speak more to the mental health impact of the coronavirus pandemic for a moment. Studies from the Journal of Psychiatric Research have shown that depression and anxiety is associated with infectious diseases, so we are sure to see more of these effects with increasing numbers of COVID-19 cases. And for people who already have mental health conditions, these are surely going to be tough times, but please hang in there. However small the steps you're taking now to cope, this is what will get you through these difficult times. Anxiety is one of those things that's extremely difficult for anyone who suffers from it, and though it may be more prevalent in certain personality types than others, any personality type can have anxiety. As we've seen, anxiety has different faces with different people, and different coping strategies will be required by different personality types. There are different levels of anxiety as well, and for people who are suffering from clinical anxiety, please seek out professional assistance. And for all of us, I'm going to end with a few tips we can all use to help us through these uncertain times. First, limit your media, including social media consumption. Find a balance between being informed and being overwhelmed. Second, stay active and have a routine. These are proven to combat depression and anxiety that otherwise might derail us when we're isolated. Third, connect with loved ones regularly. Talk about your feelings with trusted people, and also talk about things unrelated to the COVID-19 pandemic. Last, make sure you're getting accurate information from reputable sources, the Centers for Disease Control, cdc.gov, and your local healthcare provider. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you've enjoyed this episode, please give us a share and be sure to follow us on your favorite podcast platform. Like us on Facebook and visit our website, atopcareer.com. And if you have a question related to personality and the Myers-Briggs type indicator, please reach out and I'll feature your question on an upcoming episode. I'm Edythe Richards, wishing you continued good health and safety during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Thanks for listening to this episode. If you'd like to hear more, or you'd like to submit a question yourself, then you can find us at www.atopcareer.com. Until next time. MBTI and Myers-Briggs are registered trademarks of the MBTI Trust.